"If you play this piano, I'll make you a lady," laughed the Duke, but she played like a maestro. "Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining me from." The chandeliers of Wycliffe Palace burned like captured stars, casting their light on satin gowns, powdered wigs, and the restless glitter of jewels. The season's grandest ball was in full bloom, its guests wrapped in laughter and gossip, in envy and champagne. Servants moved along the walls, invisible threads keeping the scene alive. Among them was Clara, carrying a silver tray heavier than her courage. She had been taught to keep her eyes lowered, her steps soundless, her thoughts buried. But that night, a single instrument defied her silence. The grand pianoforte gleaming at the far end of the hall. Its lid stood open like a wing about to take flight. Clara glanced at it every time she passed, the way a prisoner might glance at the sea. She had not touched a piano in years, yet her fingers twitched with the memory of keys, of melodies her mother once played in a little cottage, far from this world of lords and lace. "Girl," barked Mrs. Trewin, the housekeeper, "eyes on your service, not on the instruments." "Yes, ma'am," Clara whispered, bowing her head, but her heart kept playing invisible notes. At the center of the ballroom, the Duke of Montrose laughed loudly. His voice was deep, confident, accustomed to admiration. Henry Montrose was only 30, yet his reputation for charm and arrogance filled every corner of England's polite society. He stood surrounded by ladies in shimmering silks, his dark hair brushed back, his expression one of idle amusement. "It seems the pianist has fled again," he said. "What is a ball without a little music?" Lady Beatrice, his cousin, leaned close, her fan fluttering. "Perhaps you should play, Henry. You do so many things well." "I?" He laughed. "My talents lie in conversation, not performance. But if our hired musician prefers supper to duty, perhaps we should test the talents of our guests." A murmur spread. A few gentlemen joked, a few ladies protested modestly. And then, when silence fell for a moment, Lady Beatrice's sharp eyes landed on Clara, who had paused too near the dais. "Why not let one of the servants entertain us?" she said, with a smile sweet as poison. "I've seen that one stare at the piano all evening." Every gaze turned to Clara. Her throat closed. The tray trembled in her hands. The Duke followed Beatrice's gesture, studying the young woman in the plain grey dress. "You, little maid," he said lightly, "do you have music hidden in your fingers?" "No, Your Grace," she stammered. "I only—" "Come now," he interrupted. "Do you play?" "I used to, sir." The room stirred. The servants froze by the walls, pretending not to hear. The nobles leaned forward like an audience waiting for comedy. Henry Montrose smirked. "How charming. And where did you receive such training? At the village fair?" A few laughs broke out. Clara's cheeks burned. "My mother taught me, Your Grace." "And who was she?" Her voice faltered. She once played for the gentry." "Indeed?" His tone grew amused. "Then we must test this inheritance of talent. Play something for us. If you impress me, I shall, let me see, make you a lady." Gasps, laughter, whispers. "A lady!" cried someone. "The Duke is generous tonight." Henry's eyes glinted with mockery. "Come then, prove yourself. If you play this piano, I'll make you a lady." Clara could not move. The world blurred around her. She heard laughter, the rustle of silk, the tap of shoes on marble. She wanted to disappear, to sink into the floor. But beneath the humiliation rose another feeling, raw and dangerous. Anger. "Your Grace," she said quietly. "Do you mean it?" The laughter softened. The Duke raised a brow. "I never say what I do not mean, even in jest. Play, and the promise stands." The crowd drew closer. Lady Beatrice whispered, "This will be delightful." Mrs. Trewin shook her head in warning from across the room. Clara's hands felt cold, her heart hammering. She placed the tray on a side table and approached the piano. Each step echoed in the hush. She could feel the noble's eyes like pins in her skin. When she reached the instrument, her reflection shimmered in the polished wood. A servant in a worn dress, hair tied back, hands trembling. She pulled out the bench and sat, her knees weak. "What will you play?" the Duke asked, leaning against a pillar. She didn't answer. Her fingers rested on the keys, frozen. Then, As if someone else guided them, they began to move. The first note rang out, fragile as glass, then another, then a phrase, until sound filled the room, not timid but alive. The melody rose like sunlight after storm, simple yet aching with memory. She played what her mother had once played for her, the lullaby of a life long lost. Conversations died. The servants stopped in their tracks. The ladies lowered their fans. Even the Duke's smirk faded. The music deepened, shifting from sweetness to sorrow. Every note told a story, of love betrayed, of dreams crushed, of dignity reclaimed through art. Her back straightened, her eyes half closed, her whole being inside the song. The Duke's mind reeled. This could not be. A maid. The power of it was beyond training. It was born of something older, purer. He watched her face, pale yet burning with grace. When the piece ended, silence fell so heavy it hurt. Then applause burst forth, scattered and astonished. "Remarkable," murmured Lady Crawford. "Where did she learn?" The Duke did not join the clapping. He stood motionless, studying the young woman who had just destroyed his jest. Clara rose slowly. She clasped her hands to hide their trembling. "Your Grace," she said softly, "I hope I have not offended you." Henry found his voice. "Offended me? No, you have unsettled me." That drew a few nervous chuckles, but he ignored them. He took a step closer. "What is your name?" "Clara, sir." "Clara," he repeated as if testing it. "And how long have you served at Wycliffe?" 3 years, Your Grace." He looked at her for a long moment, as if weighing an invisible truth. Then he said lightly, "Then I suppose I owe you a title. Though I fear Lady Clara may sound strange to society's ears." The guests laughed again, though softer this time, uncertain. Clara curtsied. "I do not seek titles, Your Grace. Only forgiveness, if I have broken decorum." He hesitated. "Forgiveness is not required when one gives such a gift." Lady Beatrice's fan snapped shut. "Truly, cousin, you cannot mean to indulge her. What would people say if you honored a servant for her music?" "They might say," Henry replied slowly, "that I recognize talent when I hear it." He turned to Clara. "So you will play again tomorrow? I would hear more." Her eyes widened. "Your Grace, that is all," he said, dismissing her gently but firmly. "You may go." She curtsied and turned away, her heart racing. As she left the room, whispers followed her like a trail. When the crowd began to disperse, Lady Beatrice approached her cousin. "You've made quite the spectacle. Do you realize what gossip you've invited?" Henry poured himself a glass of wine. "Let them gossip. It will keep them occupied. She's a servant. You mocked her before everyone, and now you defend her." He swirled the wine, thoughtful. "Did you hear her play?" "That's hardly the point." "It is exactly the point." Beatrice's voice sharpened. "You're behaving foolishly." "Perhaps, but I would rather be a fool than deaf to something that pure." He left her fuming and crossed to the empty piano. He touched the keys, then withdrew his hand, as if they still belonged to Clara. The melody lingered in his mind, haunting, familiar. Later, when the hall was deserted, Clara returned to collect the trays. The lights had dimmed, the air heavy with the scent of roses and wax. She approached the piano again, drawn by some magnetic force. She pressed one key softly, listening to its lonely echo. "Back for an encore?" came a voice behind her. She spun around. The Duke stood in the doorway, his coat unbuttoned, his expression unreadable. I only came to clear the tables, Your Grace." He nodded slowly. "Of course, yet you seem unable to stay away from the piano." Her hands twisted in her apron. "It was foolish of me earlier. I beg you to forget it." "I find it difficult to forget," he said quietly. "Tell me, how did you learn to play like that?" "My mother taught me." "And who was she?" Clara hesitated. "Her name was Elena Harcourt." The Duke frowned. "That name is familiar. She once played for noble houses many years ago." "Ah, yes, I remember hearing of her." He paused, a flicker of unease crossing his face. "She was dismissed from society, was she not? For some indiscretion." Clara's hands clenched. "She loved someone she should not have loved, and she paid dearly for it." He studied her, his tone softer. "And you? Have you inherited her courage or her folly?" "I have inherited her music," she said simply. He smiled faintly. "Then you must play again. But next time, Not as a servant. As my guest. Clara shook her head. That cannot be. People would talk. Let them, he replied. I have been the subject of talk all my life. It loses its sting after a while. She looked up, surprised by the weariness in his voice. For the first time she saw not the proud Duke, but a man carrying a shadow. He turned to leave, then paused. Tomorrow, after luncheon. The music room. Don't be late. When he was gone, Clara sank onto the bench, her pulse racing. What had she done? What had he seen in her music that he had not seen in the daughters of dukes and earls? The next morning came too quickly. Gossip spread through the household like fire. The maids whispered that the Duke had lost his senses, that the little servant would soon be dismissed or worse. Mrs. Trewin scolded her for bringing attention to herself. Men like him don't notice girls like you unless they wish to ruin them, the housekeeper warned. I'll keep to my duty, Clara murmured, though her hands trembled as she tied her apron. At noon a footman appeared. His Grace requests Miss Clara's presence in the music room. She followed him through corridors she had never walked, past portraits whose painted eyes judged her. The music room was flooded with light. The Duke stood beside the piano, his coat discarded, his sleeves rolled up. You came, he said. You ordered me to, Your Grace. He smiled slightly. True. Sit. She hesitated, then obeyed. Play what you wish, he said. No audience this time. Her fingers touched the keys. She played softly, a tune of morning light and trembling hope. The Duke listened in silence, pacing slowly behind her. When she finished, he said, You play as if you were telling a secret. Perhaps I am. He stopped beside her. And what secret is that? That even those born low may hold something beautiful inside. He looked at her a long time. Then the world owes you an apology, Clara Harcourt. She rose quickly. No, Your Grace, the world owes me nothing. He seemed about to argue, then smiled instead. Very well. But you will play again. Often. I'll see that you are taught properly. It would be a crime to waste such gift. I cannot accept lessons from you, she said. I have work. Work can be replaced. Talent cannot. Their eyes met, the air between them thick with words unsaid. He took a step closer, but she stepped back. I must go, she whispered. He inclined his head. As you wish. She fled before he could speak again. That evening the grand hall was quiet. The laughter and music of the previous night felt like a distant dream. Clara paused by the staircase, hearing her name murmured behind a half-closed door. She looks just like her, said a woman's voice. Clara turned. At the far end of the corridor stood the Dowager Duchess, the Duke's mother, pale and elegant, her hand clutching a letter. Her eyes were fixed on Clara with disbelief, almost fear. That music, the Duchess whispered, stepping forward. I have heard it before. The morning after the ball dawned grey and restless. The air of Wycliffe carried whispers instead of music. Servants exchanged glances in corridors. Ladies at breakfast murmured behind their cups, and even the Duke's valet walked more carefully than usual. Overnight, Clara had become the household's most dangerous topic. She's the one, said a scullery maid polishing silver. The little servant who played like an angel. Like an angel, another sneered. More like a witch. The Duke hasn't been the same since. By midday, the gossip had spread beyond the walls. Guests who had attended the ball carried the story into London, how the proud Duke of Montrose had been humbled by his own maid. Clara tried to work as if nothing had changed, though every whisper seemed to follow her. She kept to the servants' wing, sweeping and dusting until her hands ached. But she could not erase the sound of the applause or the Duke's strange gaze, half astonishment, half something she did not dare name. When Mrs. Trewin came storming into the hall, her keys rattling at her waist, Clara braced herself. Girl, the housekeeper said sharply, His Grace wishes to see you in the music room. Clara's broom froze in her hands. Now? Now. And mind you curtsy properly. The household's already in enough uproar without you adding to it. Clara followed the order, her stomach tight. The corridors were silent, but for the echo of her steps. When she entered the music room, the Duke stood by the window, the morning light tracing the line of his shoulders. You sent for me, Your Grace? She asked quietly. He turned, expression unreadable. I did. Sit, Clara. She obeyed, though her hands twisted in her lap. Your performance last night has created quite the sensation, he said. Half of London is speaking your name. She looked down. Then I must have brought you embarrassment, sir. On the contrary, you brought me intrigue. I would prefer to bring you neither. A faint smile crossed his face. You're proud. I'm only trying to survive. That is pride enough in this house. He paced a moment before continuing. I mean to keep my promise. You shall receive instruction and appear again before society. If you play as you did last night, even the most jaded will listen. She stood at once. I cannot. I am a servant. Not any more, he said firmly. You are under my patronage now. Clara's pulse quickened. What would people say? He shrugged. They already say too much. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, neither spoke. Then he said more softly, Do you understand what you did, Clara? You silenced a room of nobles who have never been silent in their lives. That is no small feat. She shook her head. It was nothing but a memory. My mother's song. Your mother must have been extraordinary. She was, Clara whispered, until society destroyed her. The words hung in the air. The Duke turned away, perhaps unwilling to ask more. Your lessons begin tomorrow. I will send for a teacher from London. I cannot accept such charity. It is not charity, he said, his voice low. It is justice. Before she could reply, Lady Beatrice entered without knocking. Ah, cousin, still entertaining your protégé, I see. Her tone was sugar over steel. How delightful! Henry's jaw tightened. Good morning, Beatrice. She ignored him, her gaze fixed on Clara. So this is the little miracle. Tell me, girl, how does it feel to rise from dust to glory overnight? Clara curtsied. It feels strange, my lady, and undeserved. How modest and how dangerous! Beatrice's smile did not reach her eyes. You have stirred the city, you know. They say the Duke is bewitched. Enough, Henry said sharply. Beatrice laughed softly. I mean no offense, but you know how fragile reputation is, cousin. A whisper can destroy a name as easily as it builds one. You might remember that before you parade your servant before the ton. Henry's tone turned cold. You may leave us. I'm sure the lady will find me again, Beatrice murmured, her eyes glinting as she left. Clara felt her throat tighten. Your Grace, she is right. I should go. I've caused trouble. He faced her, his voice gentler. You have caused curiosity. There's a difference. Ignore her. Play again. She hesitated, then moved to the piano. The melody that rose this time was softer, searching, filled with a fragile hope. When she finished, he said nothing. He only looked at her with an expression that made her heart unsteady. In the following days, the mansion changed. The Duke ordered that Clara be given lessons in deportment and diction, taught to move and speak as a lady might. The servants watched in disbelief. Some muttered that the Duke had lost his mind. Others whispered envy. Clara endured it in silence, though every day brought new humiliation. Lady Beatrice made certain of that. You hold your fork like a plough, she would say during lessons. Try again. Or, you walk as if the floor were yours. A true lady glides, she does not march. Clara obeyed, swallowing her pride. At night, she practiced alone, repeating every gesture until her body ached. When the house slept, she would slip into the music room to play in the dark. One night, she was not alone. Still at it? Came the Duke's voice from the doorway. She turned, startled. Forgive me, Your Grace. I did not wish to wake anyone. You woke me with that melody. He stepped closer. It was one of your mother's again. Yes, she must have been remarkable. Clara hesitated. She was remarkable enough to be envied, and envied enough to be ruined. Henry looked down at the piano keys. By whom? By people who thought she forgot her place. He said quietly, That is a dangerous accusation. It is truth, Clara answered, meeting his eyes. And truth is rarely safe. He gave a small, almost sad smile. You're brave to speak so. Perhaps I am foolish. He studied her for a moment longer. Do you know, Clara, you've managed to make this house feel alive again. I have only played. Sometimes that is enough. Their silence deepened until the sound of the clock broke it. Then he said, Good night, Clara. When he left, she could still feel his presence in the air, as if the melody had tied them together. But not everyone shared his admiration. The next morning, Lady Beatrice cornered Clara in the corridor. "You must enjoy this attention," she said. "Do you think yourself special because Henry looks at you?" Clara tried to pass. "Please, my lady, I have work." Beatrice caught her wrist. "Be careful, little songbird. He may raise you high for amusement, but when he grows tired, you will fall farther than you imagine." Clara pulled free and fled down the hall. That afternoon, she was summoned again, this time to the library. The Duke waited with an open letter in his hand. "I have invited several guests for supper tomorrow," he said. "I would like you to perform again." Her pulse jumped. "Before them?" "Yes. It will secure your place. If society accepts you once, they will not dare mock you again." She hesitated. "And if they don't, then they will answer to me." The supper that followed was tense and glittering. The guests included the Duchess Dowager, silent and watchful, Lady Beatrice, whose smile was sharp, and several lords whose curiosity bordered on condescension. Clara entered quietly, dressed in a simple gown of pale blue that Henry had ordered for her. She sat at the piano, aware of every eye. When her fingers began to move, the music rose pure and steady. Yet halfway through she faltered, because she saw Lady Beatrice across the room, whispering to one of the guests and passing him a folded note. The man smirked. When the performance ended, applause followed, but it was cool. Someone said loudly, "Extraordinary for a servant." Clara's face burned. She curtsied and withdrew, her heart pounding. In the corridor, she leaned against the wall, fighting tears. Behind her, footsteps approached. It was Lady Beatrice again, satisfaction glowing in her eyes. "My dear, you should know better than to believe a Montrose promise. Men like my cousin play with people as they play cards." Clara's voice trembled. "You are mistaken." "Am I?" Beatrice drew a paper from her sleeve. "This is a copy of a letter I found among my uncle's things. It mentions a pianist named Eleanor Harcourt. That name should sound familiar." Clara's blood ran cold. "What of it?" "It says she was dismissed from society for attempting to elope with a married nobleman, Lord Montrose, the Duke's father." Clara stared at her. "You lie." Beatrice smiled. "Do I? The evidence is quite convincing. Your mother was his mistress. That makes you—" She leaned close. "A scandal by birth." Clara's hands trembled. "Why show me this?" "Because you should know the truth before you dream too high. You cannot escape what you are. Even your music won't wash away a stain like that." She turned to leave, but froze. Clara's gaze had shifted past her shoulder. At the doorway stood the Duke, silent, his face pale as marble. He had heard every word. For a moment, no one breathed. The corridor felt smaller, the air thick with what had just been said. Lady Beatrice's triumphant smile faltered when she saw her cousin's face. Henry Montrose looked not angry, but wounded in a way that stripped the room of all pretense. "Henry," Beatrice began lightly, "you should not take offense. I merely thought the girl deserved to know—" "Leave," he said. His voice was calm, but the calm was terrible. "Cousin, leave." Beatrice curtsied stiffly, her chin high, and swept away without another word. Her perfume lingered like mockery in the air. When the echo of her steps faded, Clara spoke first, her voice barely a whisper. "It is true, Your Grace. My mother was Eleanor Harcourt. She loved your father and he destroyed her." Henry's jaw tightened. "My father was a man of his time," he said at last, "but that time was cruel. I did not know the details." "She paid for his pride with her life," Clara said. "After he cast her aside, no one would hire her. She played in taverns until she fell ill. I was a child when she died." He looked away, his hands clasped behind him. "I cannot change the past." "No," she answered. "But now you know who I am, and why I should not remain here. You are not to leave. I cannot stay." "You will stay because I ask it," he said sharply, then softened. "Because I wish to make amends." "Amends?" Her laugh was short, bitter. "You cannot repay what was stolen." "I can try." She shook her head. "Your kindness now only feels like pity. I don't need that." He took a step closer. "It isn't pity. Then what is it?" He opened his mouth, but no answer came. The silence between them was heavy. "I will pack my things tonight," Clara said. "You owe me nothing." Before he could stop her, she turned and left. That night, rain lashed against the windows of Wycliffe Palace. The Duke, silent, Servants hurried through the halls, shutting the shutters, muttering about the storm. In her small attic room, Clara folded her few dresses into a bundle. Each item was a reminder of service and humiliation. She was reaching for her cloak when a knock sounded on the door. "Come in," she said warily. The Duke himself stepped inside, his hair damp from the rain, his coat thrown over one arm. "Forgive the intrusion," he said quietly. "I could not let you leave like this. I have nothing left to say." "Then allow me to speak." She hesitated, but he continued. "You were right. My father wronged your mother. His vanity ruined her. I have carried his name with pride, but tonight it feels like a chain. If I could undo what he did, I would." Clara looked down. "Words cannot mend what was broken." "No," he said, "but music might." She frowned. "What do you mean?" "I have arranged a recital in 2 weeks' time," he said. "Patrons, musicians, critics from London. Play for them. Let your mother's name rise again through you. Let them know that the music they cast out has returned to haunt their arrogance." Her eyes filled. "You would do that? For her?" "For you," he said simply. She turned away, unable to meet his gaze. "If I do this, it will not be as your charity. It will be as justice," he replied, "and perhaps as redemption." The words struck her, fragile and dangerous. She nodded slowly. "Very well. But once it is done, I will go." He bowed slightly. "Then let it be done." For days, Wycliffe was transformed. The ballroom became a rehearsal hall. Musicians arrived, curious to meet the mysterious prodigy the Duke was sponsoring. Some offered polite smiles, others whispered behind her back, wondering how a servant had captured the Duke's favor. Clara ignored them all. She practiced from dawn until the candles burned low, her fingers flying across the keys until they ached. When she grew weary, she would see her mother's face in memory, smiling, urging her to continue. Henry watched her often, silently. Sometimes he brought her tea, sometimes nothing but presents. The more he watched, the less certain he became of what he felt. It began as guilt, then admiration. Now it was something deeper, something he dared not name. One afternoon, as the storm clouds rolled away, he found her seated at the piano with her head bowed. "Tired?" he asked. She nodded. "My hands ache, but it's a good ache." He smiled faintly. "You play as if your soul were on fire. Perhaps it is. Then let it burn," he said softly. "Let them all see." She looked up, startled by the intensity in his tone. "You sound as though you expect a battle. In a way, it is one. You against the ghosts of my father's world. And if I lose?" He reached for her hand but stopped himself just before touching it. "You won't." The night of the rehearsal, the musicians gathered in the grand hall. Henry stood at the edge of the room, arms folded, watching her. Clara played as if the music were the only truth left in the world. When she finished, the violinist, a grey-haired man with sharp eyes, approached her. "Miss Harcourt," he said, "forgive my boldness, but your phrasing, I've heard it before." "My mother taught me," she replied. "Ah, then you are Elena Harcourt's daughter." His tone softened. "She played once for my ensemble. A remarkable woman. It was a tragedy what happened." Henry listened, his expression unreadable. Clara thanked the man quietly, though her throat was tight. Later, as the musicians departed, Henry spoke. "Do you see now? You are not forgotten." She shook her head. "Not I. She. And that is enough." That night, thunder rolled again in the distance. Clara sat at the piano long after everyone slept, playing softly to the dark. She did not hear the door open. "You'll wear yourself to exhaustion," Henry said. She turned, startled. "I didn't think anyone was awake." "I couldn't sleep." "Nor could I." He stepped closer, watching her hands move over the keys. "You play like someone saying goodbye." "Perhaps I am." He frowned. "Don't speak of leaving yet. I must. Once the recital is over, I will have done what I came to do." He looked at her for a long time, then said quietly, "You think I wish to keep you here out of guilt. You are wrong. Then why?" "Because since you came, this house no longer feels like a tomb." She stared at him, heart thudding. "Your Grace." "Henry," he said, "when we are alone, call me Henry." Her breath caught. "That would be improper." "Then let it be improper." Before she could answer, a flash of lightning filled the room. Rain began to drum on the glass. She turned back to the keys, playing to drown the storm, but her hands shook. He moved behind her, not touching, only near. His voice was low. "Tell me something. When you play, what do you think of?" "My mother, and of everything I have lost." "Do you ever think of what you could gain?" "I have learned not to." "Then let me teach you otherwise," he whispered. She rose abruptly, the spell broken. "Please, do not speak so. You are my master." "I was," he said. "Perhaps I no longer wish to be." Before she could respond, thunder cracked overhead. A servant burst through the door, breathless. "Your Grace, a messenger from London, urgent. The royal patron himself requests the presence of the maid pianist at the winter ball next month." Clara froze. "The royal patron?" The servant nodded, handing over the letter. Henry broke the seal and scanned it. His expression shifted from surprise to awe. "They want you to perform before the crown." Clara shook her head. "It must be a mistake." "No mistake." He handed her the letter. "It's addressed to you by name, Miss Clara Harcourt." Her eyes widened. "How could they know of me?" "Word spreads quickly when greatness appears," he said. "This is your chance to reclaim everything." She stared at the letter, trembling. "I cannot. I am not ready for such eyes." "You are ready," he said firmly. "And I will be there with you." "I don't belong in that world." He stepped closer, his voice gentle. "You belonged there before any of them knew your name. Your mother's blood runs in your veins. You will walk into that ballroom, play your heart, and make them remember what they destroyed." Tears filled her eyes. "You make it sound so easy." "It won't be. But I will make certain you are protected." She looked at him then, and the storm outside seemed to fade. "Why do you care so much?" "Because," he said slowly, "I see in you everything I once wished to be. Courage, truth, freedom." The firelight flickered between them. For a heartbeat neither moved. Then she turned away. "I will play," she said softly, "for my mother." He nodded. "And I will stand beside you." The rain battered the windows harder. She lifted her chin. "Then so be it." Henry's voice was low. "It was never a wager, Clara. It was destiny." Before she could reply, the servant returned, breathless again. "Forgive me, Your Grace. There is more. The royal ball is to be held at Wycliffe itself, under your patronage." Clara went pale, clutching the edge of the piano as the storm thundered over the house. The weeks that followed passed like a dream, half golden, half unbearable. The Duke's estate filled once more with tailors, florists, musicians, and servants preparing for the winter ball. For most, it was an honor. For Clara, it was a trial. Every corridor whispered her name. Every maid who curtsied seemed to hide a smirk. Yet every time she doubted herself, she remembered her mother's music and the promise she had made, to play not for revenge, but for grace. Henry Montrose carried himself differently now. The arrogance that once marked his every gesture had softened into quiet purpose. He oversaw the preparations himself, often standing beside Clara as she rehearsed. He said little, but when he did, his words steadied her. "Do not think of them," he told her one afternoon as she stumbled through a passage. "Think only of what the music demands." "I am trying," she said, "but when I imagine the faces that will be watching," he smiled faintly. "They have never frightened me. Don't let them frighten you." She looked up at him, her voice low. "They are your peers, Your Grace. I am the intruder." He paused, then said softly, "Then perhaps I am an intruder too, for I no longer recognize their world." The rehearsals grew longer. Lady Beatrice remained polite, but her silence hid resentment. The Dowager Duchess, frail but observant, attended one session and said only, "Play with forgiveness, child, not pride. Pride built this house. Forgiveness will keep it standing." The night before the ball, snow began to fall, soft, relentless, silent. Wycliffe shimmered under candlelight as guests arrived from London, filling the rooms with laughter and expectation. Clara, in her chamber, sat before the mirror while the maid pinned her hair. Her gown was pale ivory, simple compared to the silks of noble ladies, yet when she stood, she looked every inch the woman her mother had once been. When the maid left, she whispered to her reflection, "For you, mother." A knock came. She turned to find Henry in the doorway. He had not yet dressed for the evening. His coat was unbuttoned, his hair disheveled. "You should not be here," she said. "I know," he replied, "but I needed to see if you were ready. Ready or not, the hour comes." He stepped closer. "If I could take the weight from your shoulders, I would." She shook her head. "You already have. You gave me this chance." He looked at her for a long moment. "When you walk into that hall, remember, no one there has power over you anymore. You are not my servant, nor their amusement. You are music itself." Her heart stirred. "You speak as if you know the language of courage." "I'm learning it," he said. "You are my teacher." She lowered her gaze. "You should go, Henry. They'll be looking for you." He hesitated, then bowed slightly. "Until tonight, Clara." When he was gone, she let herself breathe. The music of the ball reached her long before she entered. The orchestra played lively waltzes, laughter echoed, crystal clinked. But as the hour neared, the hum began to fade into anticipation. The Duke appeared at her side again, now dressed in black and silver, every line of his face composed, but unreadable. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly. "Yes." "Then take my arm." She hesitated. "People will talk." "Let them. It will save them the trouble later." She placed her hand on his arm, and together they entered the ballroom. A hush swept over the guests. The chandeliers glittered above, their light spilling over the crowd. Ladies in crimson, lords in dark coats, jewels and feathers gleaming. But all eyes followed the Duke and the woman at his side. Henry led her to the piano and stopped. "Miss Harcourt," he said loudly enough for all to hear, "the stage is yours." Clara curtsied. "Thank you, Your Grace." Then she sat. The room seemed to hold its breath. Her fingers hovered above the keys for one heartbeat, then two. And then she began. The first notes were quiet as snowfall, delicate as a whisper. Slowly they unfolded into a melody no one recognized, yet every listener felt as if they had known it all their lives. It was her mother's song, once forbidden, now reborn. Lady Beatrice's fan fell from her hand. The Dowager Duchess closed her eyes. Even the footmen at the doors forgot their duty. The music deepened, rising with power, then falling again into tenderness. Clara's face glowed with concentration, her movements light, unforced. Every chord spoke forgiveness, every pause carried memory. When she reached the final passage, the sound swelled until it filled every corner of the hall. Then, with one long, aching note, she let it go. Silence followed, and then applause. It broke like thunder, rippling through the room. Guests stood, some cheering, some wiping tears. Henry stepped forward and offered her his hand. She rose, breathless. "Bravo," said the royal patron himself, moving through the crowd. He was a broad man with kind eyes and a voice that carried. That was not performance, it was resurrection. Clara curtsied deeply. "Your Majesty is too kind." He looked to the Duke. "Montrose, you have discovered England's treasure. Tell me, child, whose music was that?" "It was my mother's," she said simply. "She was Elena Harcourt." The name swept through the audience like a wind. There were gasps, murmurs, disbelief. But the patron only smiled. "Elena Harcourt. I remember her. Your playing honors her name." Henry bowed. "Your Majesty, Miss Harcourt is not only her mother's heir. She has surpassed her." The applause renewed, louder this time. When the royal patron moved on, Henry turned to Clara, his voice low. "You did it." She smiled faintly. "No, we did." He studied her face, pride and something deeper shining in his eyes. "You should know, Clara. Tonight, you have undone my father's sins." "Music did that," she said softly. "Then music has more mercy than men." The rest of the evening passed like a dream. Everywhere Clara went, people greeted her with admiration. Even Lady Beatrice, cornered by the Dowager's cold stare, offered a stiff compliment. "You have done the family proud, Miss Harcourt." "Thank you, my lady," Clara replied, her tone gentle but steady. When the last waltz ended, she slipped away from the noise to breathe in the snow-cooled air of the garden. The night was calm now, the stars sharp above the white lawns. She closed her eyes, letting the quiet settle. Footsteps approached behind her. She knew the sound before he spoke. "You vanish whenever triumph finds you," Henry said softly. "I am not fond of triumph," she answered without turning. He came to stand beside her. And yet you earned it. It still feels like a dream. Then let it be one worth waking from. She smiled faintly. You speak like a poet tonight. Only because prose cannot hold what I feel. She looked at him. The moonlight made his face softer, almost vulnerable. You need not say more, Henry, she said gently. You have already given me freedom. Freedom is not all I wish for you. Then what? He hesitated, then spoke. A life without fear. A name no one dares tarnish. A home where music never dies. And if you would let me, I would build that life with you. Her breath caught. You cannot mean, I do. I love you, Clara. I do not care for titles or blood. You have given me peace I did not know I lacked. She turned away, struggling for words. You cannot throw away your world for me. It is already gone. You burned it away with your song. Tears filled her eyes. Not of sorrow, but of wonder. Do you know what you ask? The world will not forgive you easily. I have lived long enough seeking its forgiveness. I would rather seek yours. For a long moment they stood in silence, snowflakes catching in their hair. Then she whispered, If you mean it, then prove it. I will. Not in words, Henry, in deeds. He nodded slowly. Then give me time. Tomorrow I will make it right. Tomorrow? Yes. Let me show them who you are to me. Her heart ached with hope and fear. If you do this, there is no return. He smiled faintly. I would not wish to return. The garden fell still again. She looked at him, unable to speak. He took her hand, not as a duke taking what he wanted, but as a man offering what he was. Clara, he said softly, I have never been surer of anything. She met his gaze, her voice trembling. Then I will wait for tomorrow. Tomorrow, he promised. The snow fell between them, quiet and endless, and somewhere inside the great house, the piano still echoed with the melody that had begun it all. Morning light spilled over the frozen lawns of Wycliffe, turning the snow into sheets of silver. The house still slept after the revelry of the winter ball. Only a few servants moved quietly through the halls, clearing what remained of the night before. In the stillness, Clara stood by her window, watching the dawn unfold. The events of the evening returned to her in waves, the applause, the faces, the Duke's words in the garden. She pressed her hands to her chest, unsure if it had been real. He had said he loved her. He had said tomorrow he would prove it. Yet part of her heart feared the daylight would change everything. A knock came at her door. Mrs. Trewin entered with a respectful bow. His Grace requests that you come to the great hall, Miss Harcourt. Now. Yes, the household is assembled. Clara's pulse quickened. She dressed quickly and followed the housekeeper through the corridor. The great hall blazed with morning firelight, its tall windows bright with snow-reflected sun. Servants lined the walls. Several noble guests, still lingering from the night before, whispered among themselves. At the center stood the Duke, dressed not for leisure but for ceremony. When Clara entered, all talk ceased. Henry stepped forward. Miss Clara Harcourt, he said, his voice steady. Last night you restored the honor that my family once destroyed. Today, before all who stand here, I mean to restore yours. She froze. Your Grace. He lifted his hand. Please, let me finish. Turning to the crowd, he continued. Many years ago, my father cast out a woman named Elena Harcourt, a woman of talent, dignity, and heart. He stole from her what no man had the right to take, her name and her peace. Her daughter stands here today as the proof that grace outlives cruelty. I, Henry Montrose, Duke of Wycliffe, declare before witnesses that Miss Harcourt is under my protection, and will henceforth be recognized as a lady of this house. A murmur ran through the hall. Some faces showed surprise, others disapproval, but no one spoke. The Duke turned back to Clara. And more than that, I ask her to become my wife. The words fell like a bell. For a moment, she could only stare. You... what? He smiled faintly. Marry me, Clara. Not for gratitude, not for redemption. For love. The room seemed to vanish, leaving only the sound of her heartbeat. She felt every gaze upon her, yet none of it mattered. Henry, she whispered, you cannot do this. Before them all. I must. Let there be no shadow between us. She took a step toward him, her voice trembling. Do you know what it will cost you? Your peers will turn away. They will call you mad. They already have. he said lightly, but I have never felt more sane. She stared at him, tears rising. You would give up your world for me? I would give up the world itself if it meant hearing you play each morning. A hush fell so deep it felt sacred. Then slowly, Clara smiled through her tears. Then yes, Henry. Yes, I will marry you. The hall broke into a low rumble of astonishment. Some servants wept openly. Mrs. Trewin clasped her hands to her mouth. Lady Beatrice, pale and tight-lipped, turned away but said nothing. The Duke reached for Clara's hand and kissed it, his voice low enough only for her. You have made me the happiest of men. And you, she whispered, have made me free. That same day, a messenger rode to London to deliver the announcement. By week's end, all of society buzzed with disbelief, yet the royal patron himself sent his blessing, declaring it a union of music and nobility, rare and fine. With that, gossip softened into reluctant admiration. Preparations began at once. Henry insisted the ceremony be held not in London, but at Wycliffe in the same hall where she had first played. Clara protested, saying it was too grand. He only smiled. It was the scene of my pride. Let it now be the scene of my redemption. The days passed in a blur of arrangements. Clara barely slept. Between fittings and correspondence, she still found moments to sit at the piano. Each time she played, Henry would stop whatever he was doing to listen. Once, when she asked why, he said simply, "It reminds me who I am when I forget." The morning of the wedding arrived with clear skies and sunlight dancing on snow. The church bells of the nearby village rang through the valley. Guests gathered, lords and ladies, musicians, villagers who had once known her mother. The Dowager Duchess sat in the front pew, her eyes shining with quiet pride. Even Lady Beatrice attended, her face pale but composed. When Clara entered the hall, the crowd rose. She wore no jewels, only a simple gown of white silk and a ribbon of pale blue at her wrist, the colour of her mother's old shawl. Henry stood at the altar, his eyes fixed on her as though nothing else existed. The ceremony was brief but tender. When the vows were spoken and the blessing given, Henry lifted her hand to his lips and applause filled the hall. Afterward, the ballroom came alive again with music, laughter and light. Clara sat at the piano, at first hesitating, then smiling as the crowd called for her to play. Henry nodded from across the room. She began with a soft prelude, the melody light as snow, then wove into it the song that had once silenced an entire ballroom, the song of her mother now reborn as joy. As she played, Henry came to stand beside her, one hand resting gently on her shoulder. When the final note faded, he whispered, "The world is listening, Clara. Let it," she said, smiling up at him. The guests toasted. The musicians took up their violins and laughter filled the air. Henry led her into a dance, slow and unhurried. Around them, the candles shimmered. The snow beyond the windows glittered like 1,000 tiny stars. "You have changed everything," she said softly. "Perhaps," he replied, "but you have given it meaning." She laughed through happy tears. "I cannot believe this is real." He brushed a stray curl from her cheek. "It is more than real. It is ours." The Dowager Duchess approached them later, leaning on her cane. "My son," she said, her voice thin but firm, "your father's name once brought shame. Today, you have turned it into something noble." "I thank you." Henry bowed his head. "No, mother." She did. The Duchess smiled at Clara. "Then I thank you, my dear." As the evening wore on, guests began to drift away. The music softened into gentle waltzes. Clara and Henry slipped out to the terrace overlooking the gardens. The night was crisp, the stars burning clear above. "It feels as though the world has grown quiet for us," she said. He took her hands. "Perhaps it has been waiting for this moment." She smiled. "What will we do now?" "Whatever you wish." "I wish to teach children to play," she said, "to open this house not just for nobility but for anyone who loves music." "Then that shall be our work." She looked at him, her voice low. "You truly mean it." "I mean every word." She leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "Then I am home." He kissed her forehead. "Home," he echoed. The snow began to fall again, soft and slow. Inside, the piano still waited, the same one that had changed their fates. Later that night, Clara sat before it once more, her gown gathered around her. her husband beside her. "Play something for me," he said. "What shall I play?" "Something new." She smiled. "Then I must compose it as I go." "Perfect," he said. Her fingers touched the keys, weaving a melody bright and tender. Henry listened in silence, then said, "Do you know what I hear?" "What?" "Our story." She laughed quietly. "Then let it never end." "It never will," he said. The melody flowed, a song of promise, of beginnings rather than endings. In that moment, the Duke and the girl who had once been a servant were simply two souls bound by the same rhythm. Years later, Wycliffe would be known not as a palace of pride, but as a house of music. Children from villages and cities alike came to learn, their laughter echoing through the corridors once filled with silence. The piano remained at the heart of it all, polished by time and memory. But for now, in that first quiet night of their marriage, Clara lifted her hands from the keys and turned to Henry. He smiled, his eyes warm with love that asked for nothing more. "Henry," she said softly, "do you remember what you told me that night? That if I played the piano, you'd make me a lady?" He laughed gently. "I remember. And you kept your promise." "No," he said, drawing her close. "You made yourself one." She rested her head against his chest, hearing the steady rhythm of his heart, the truest music she had ever known. Outside, the snow fell without sound, and inside, the house breathed with peace. Her voice rose in a whisper meant only for him. Pride may divide us, but forgiveness makes us noble. Thank you so much for listening to this story all the way to the end. We hope it moved you as much as it moved us while telling it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment telling us where you're listening from and what you liked the most. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like as a show of support. That really motivates us to keep creating and sharing more stories full of emotion and life lessons. And before we go, we want to remind you that an exciting and heartwarming story recommendation will appear on the final screen. If you'd like to enjoy it, just click on the video. Thank you once again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.